The phone vibrated once, a small shiver against the nightstand like a moth battering glass, and my eyes snapped open before I understood why I was awake. The numbers on the clock glowed 3:17 a.m., a feverish green that made the room look sick. Beside me, Molly breathed slow and even, curled on her side with her arm thrown across the empty space between us like a claim that somehow felt counterfeit tonight. Another buzz and then a third, an insistence. I reached out in the dark and touched the edge of my own phone, but it was silent, cold as a coin. Molly's phone was face down, half under the book she dropped when she got too tired to finish. The glass was warm under my fingertips when I slid it toward me, the way skin is warm long after the person leaves the room. Tap screen on, a banner notification bloomed up like a bruise. Can't wait to see you tomorrow, baby. Miss you so much. Kiss Mark. My first thought wasn't what it should have been. It was practical, defensive. Maybe it's a joke, a wrong number, her sister messing with emojis in a late-night chaos she would explain and we would both laugh about. But the word baby landed like a dull blade, and the kiss mark stayed on the glass even after the notification slid upward and hid itself. I could feel my pulse in the joints of my fingers. A quiet, slow-breathing part of me whispered, "Don't wake her, not yet, no first, no at all." I opened the thread. The chat bubbles were a history written in neon, her soft gray to his bright blue, weeks of them, months. There were the easy ones, "You look so good at lunch. Can't stop thinking about you." There were the filthy ones, the borrowed hotel rooms, the little lies pinned like butterflies to their private corkboard. And there was his name in the contact header, just the letter D and a fire emoji like she'd gamified him, like he was a game she could win and repeat until the dopamine wore off. I typed without thinking. "Tomorrow, what time should I expect you?" Expect. The word tasted like metal. I hit send, put the phone face down again, and lay back with my eyes open to the dark. The screen lit up almost immediately through the cover of the book, painting the pages from below like a campfire. God, I can't wait. Parking garage at 12, same level as last time. Wear that black dress. The one that makes me forget my own name. I didn't have to wake her. The vibration rattled under the paperback, jittered across the wood, and jumped to the floor with a clap that shattered the silence. Molly bolted upright with a gasp softer than a sob. For a moment she looked like a diver surfacing too fast, not ready for air. She scrambled, fingers skidding on smooth glass, snatched the phone and froze with its pale light bleaching her face. Her mouth opened, her eyes, those eyes I'd memorized, those eyes I'd built a life around, filled and then emptied like something had been poured out of them. "Pa," she started and stopped. "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice a performance I hadn't rehearsed, still heavy with pretend sleep. "Nothing, too fast," a brittle word that sparked against the floorboards. "Bad dream." She backed off the bed and into the bathroom, the phone held to her chest like a relic, and the lock slid home with a tiny, final sound that echoed down every hallway in my head. I stared at the dark window and saw my own face in it, dumbly reflected. The city beyond it, a sparse constellation of strangers who didn't know that the ground had opened up and I was falling. When she came out, her eyes were rimmed red and raw, her hair a halo gone wrong. "Paul, we need to talk," she said, and the words sounded like they'd been dragged over gravel to get here. "Who is he?" She stood there, the towel bar at her back like a hand on a prisoner's shoulder, and the clock ticked out a few more seconds of our old life. Then David, the name tumbled out. He's a colleague." "Of course he was." The new project manager with a laugh that carried. The one who asked questions during other people's presentations to make sure the room kept him in mind. The one who lingered near the catering table long enough to be offered conversations as if they were canapés. She told me everything in a rush to outrun it. The first drink that wasn't supposed to be two, the kiss by the elevator because nobody takes the elevator at 9:52 p.m. on a Thursday, the hotel with the anonymous carpet and the curtains that fought back at the morning. The word mistake kept appearing like a buoy for a drowning swimmer. She said "I'm sorry" like it could be a key. "Pack a bag," I said when she ran out of synonyms for regret. "Go." Her hands shook on the dresser drawer. A sweater fell to the floor and she didn't pick it up. In the doorway she turned as if a spell required it. "Paul," she said, and then nothing else came out. The door closed. The house changed shapes around me, growing rooms I didn't recognize, hallways where there had been none. I stood in the kitchen and stared at the coffee maker because it still knew what to do in the morning. The calm that followed wasn't mercy. It was the cool side of a burn. I made a plan without looking at it directly because if I stared at it I might see myself inside it and stop. HR first, no names attached to mine, just policy quoted like scripture, examples lifted from the real to make it irresistible to the rulebook. Then Emily. I didn't know her, but I found her quickly enough. Softness at the edges in her photos like she'd been lit by a window on purpose. 2 kids under 5 and a dog who always looked proud of its leash. I wrote a message with my hands steady and attached screenshots that made my stomach go empty. I didn't wait to see who would answer first. There is a clean energy in a thing launched that can't be brought back. That afternoon, I went to the bar I knew he'd choose when things were bad, the one with dark wood and sports on 3 TVs he could pretend to care about. He was at the counter, staring into something amber like it could predict his future. I took the stool at his shoulder and watched recognition do its swift work on his face. David. Paul, he said and swallowed my name like it burned. Enjoy your drink. He didn't answer. His hand trembled, a small, private earthquake before he put the glass down empty. I always thought you were decent, I said, and let the sentence trail off until his eyes dropped, until the room tilted toward us. He said I'm sorry like he was asking for water. Sorry doesn't cut it, I said, and the words were calm, the calm of a field after the fire has passed and left only the black truth of the ground. You took something that wasn't yours. Now watch what happens when the people you forgot to consider start considering you. I left him there with his empty glass and my silhouette in his peripheral vision like a stain he couldn't scrub out. By evening, HR had emailed a mandatory meeting invite. By Friday, his badge would stop opening doors. Emily would hold a phone in her hand like a weapon and choose herself, and the house with the swing set would go silent, suddenly slightly larger for the rooms he could no longer enter. At 3:17 a.m. the next night, my phone stayed still. Sleep found me with its careful hands. But the image of that kiss emoji on her screen had branded the inside of my head, and when I closed my eyes I saw it, bright and small and stupid, hovering over the wreckage like a color someone forgot to grieve. The morning after the bar, the city was washed and new and didn't care about me at all, which was a relief. The coffee maker blinked a stubborn 12 o'clock like a reminder that time can be anything if nobody sets it. I sat at the table with a yellow legal pad and made a list of what remained mine. The mortgage, the dog-eared copy of a novel with a note in the margin that mentioned the light in a way I'll never forget, the battered tea kettle that screamed like a whistle at a distant stadium. A message appeared from an unknown number at 9:14 a.m. Emily. I'm sorry to contact you, but I think I deserve to hear the truth from someone who doesn't owe him anything. Are you available to talk? I called. Her voice had a clarity to it I envied even through the fracture. She asked precise questions, the kind that have right answers and wrong answers and nothing in between. I told her the right answers. There were long pauses where she didn't make a sound, and I knew she was holding her breath until she ran out of air and had to choose to live. Thank you, she said finally, and it sounded like a decision. I'm okay. I will be. The HR dominoes fell next, neat and bloodless. We take these allegations very seriously, an email intoned as if it were a person, as if it could lower its voice in a conference room and look concerned. A week later. Following an internal review, the phrase that means someone has already packed a box, that a career has been shrunk to what can fit between flaps of cardboard and the last 30 feet to a parking lot. Molly texted on the third day after she left, Paul, please, can we talk? I'll meet you anywhere. Somewhere theatrical part of me suggested the parking garage at noon, the same level as last time, but the thought died of its own weight before it became a joke. I typed an erased no 3 times, instead tomorrow, Café Arnott, 8 am 10 minutes. She arrived early, hair pulled back, makeup a mask made by someone who knew too much about hiding. She reached for me like a reflex she'd forgotten to suppress. I stepped back. I don't want your apologies, I said without sitting. I want your honesty. She nodded the way people do when they've rehearsed in their cars, when they've played out the scene with the version of me who is lenient and does not exist. It wasn't about you, she said. It was about how small I felt he made me feel. Knew, I offered. She winced. I don't know how to explain the way a door in your chest can open and you don't know how to close it, she said, and the sentence was lovely and useless. I'm sorry. Your phone, I said. That night the text meant for him. I watched it land, her hands knotted around the coffee cup. I was going to end it, she said, quickly like it could outrun the past. I swear to God, Paul. I remembered the kiss emoji. I remembered the whole theater of it, carefully staged, the backstage laughter. No, I said, you were going to see him at noon. Silence expanded until the cafe was too small for it. I've started seeing a therapist, I said finally, surprising both of us. I suggest you do the same, for the things you think you lost, for the things you chose to lose. She cried without noise, a napkin broke beneath her fingertips. When I left, she didn't try to follow. Therapy was a room with a rug that someone had chosen for calm, and a window that pretended trees could solve something by existing on the other side of it. The therapist's name was June. She wore shoes that didn't apologize when they touched the floor. What do you want? She asked, early and often, as if the answer would change every time and we'd learn something by watching it fluctuate. I want my life back, I said. She looked at me like people look at maps they can't yet read. What did your life contain that you believe is gone? Trust, I said, the feeling of being I don't know rooted. A place to put my hands. We talked about grief as a thing with stages that do not line up in orderly progression, but instead dogpile, elbows, and knees. We talked about anger as an engine that will run whether or not it is attached to a car. We talked about the part of me that had wanted to burn down not only the bridge but the entire riverbank. You sent the screenshots, she said, not judging. You tipped the first domino. He did, I said, meaning David, meaning Molly, meaning the moment he put his hand on the small of her back and she didn't step away. June tilted her head. And you, she said gently, you decided what kind of man you would be in response. I left the office lighter than I'd arrived, which is a trick some rooms know how to do. At home, I opened the closet and found the sweater Molly had dropped, still puddled like it was waiting to be an apology by itself. I folded it and put it into a box labeled with her name, then crossed out her name and wrote donate. It felt like a benediction that didn't require a church. At 11:52 that night, a text came from a number labeled unknown but obvious. You destroyed my life. Are you proud? The blue bubble blinked, impatient. I read it 3 times and felt my body try on the shape of who he wanted me to be. Petty, cornered, triumphant. Then I remembered the amber in his glass, the shrinking man at the bar. My thumbs moved. You did that yourself. I just turned on the light. I put the phone face down and went to bed. Sleep came like a decision I finally had the authority to make. The next morning, the HR email hit the all-company inbox with the kind of bland finality bureaus have perfected. We wish him the best in his future endeavors. I pictured those endeavors as a row of doors without handles. At lunch, a few people stopped at my desk and said nothing in particular in voices that meant everything and nothing, the way people perform community when they smell smoke but can't find the fire. By evening, my mother had called, which meant Molly had called her. Sweetheart, she said, I don't understand, but I'm here. I let the word here sit between us like an heirloom. There are days after the apocalypse. They look like normal days, but they're not. They are daylight over ash. And one of those days, I found myself in the grocery store staring at Honeycrisp apples and thinking, very suddenly and very sincerely, about forgiveness. Not offering it, not receiving it, just the word heavy and round. When I got home, the front steps were wet with a brief rainstorm I'd missed by minutes. On the doormat, an envelope with my name in her handwriting. Inside. A letter that told the truth without making it better. I loved you, it said, which is not a defense, and I was lonely inside myself, which is not an excuse. She didn't ask for another chance. She said she was leaving the city. That night, alone in the house, I stood in the kitchen and realized I wasn't angry in the same way anymore. The engine had finally sputtered and gone quiet. The silence that remained wasn't empty. It felt like soil turned over ready. To be continued in part 3. The first time I laughed really laughed, it happened stupidly over a dog. A neighbor's retriever barreled into me on the sidewalk as if appointed by a committee, knocked my coffee out of my hand, and then looked at me like, this has been the plan all along. Its owner apologized in a flurry. I told her it was fine, more than fine. I crouched and let the dog press its warm skull into my palm, and for a second the entire world simplified to weight and warmth and breath. I adopted a mutt 2 weeks later. Brown eyes like honest weather, a white stripe down her nose like someone had touched her with a paintbrush and walked away mid-stroke. I named her Nova because I wanted a star that had already exploded and still managed to be beautiful from far away. We walked until the city made sense again. The small park where an older man in a brimmed hat played chess with himself. The block where the bakery vent blew cinnamon into the air like a rumor. June asked about my anger, and I told her about the nights when it lay down at my feet like a well-trained dog and the mornings when it chewed the furniture. Give it a job, she said. Anger that doesn't have something to build will find something to break. So I built a routine that held even when the weather didn't. I built muscle where there had been softness and softness where there had been nothing. I called my father on Tuesdays and listened to him talk about how the tomatoes were doing as if plants were a language I could learn in middle age. I said yes when friends asked if I wanted to go hear a band in a basement, if I wanted to try a new restaurant where the menu was one sheet of paper and the wine list was a story someone loved telling. In the second month, Emily texted again, not an unknown number anymore, just a name. This will sound strange, but I think it might help if we talked. Grief is loud, and this particular song is one we both know, Coffee. I met her at a quiet place by the river where the tables were scarred and honest. She was smaller in person than in the photos on her feed, or maybe that's just what grief does, it edits. We spoke like survivors of a thing with a proper noun. She told me about the day she put his boxes on the porch and watched a stranger's truck swallow them. I told her about 3:17 a.m. I wanted to write something cruel, she admitted, cheeks coloring. I did in drafts. I wrote things that would make a child flinch, but in the end I sent one sentence, you need to go, and I felt not powerful exactly. But clean. Clean is a miracle, I said and meant it. We laughed a little, the way people do when laughing is permitted again. She asked about Nova and her kids asked if they could meet the dog sometime. I said yes and was surprised by how easy the word felt. The same week, I bumped into David on a weekday afternoon on a street where I never saw him before, a coincidence that felt like a test. He was thinner, shabbier around the edges, the kind of tired that sleep doesn't help. For half a second the old engine coughed awake, but then it died after 1 week revolution and I was left with something like pity cooling in my chest. He stopped as if I were an intersection. Paul, he said, and his voice had no performance left in it. I'm not here to, he gestured vaguely, to sorry, to excuse, to what are the words that rebuild a bridge you blew up yourself. You don't have to be anything here, I said. You can just keep walking. He nodded, and the relief in it was almost humanizing. He went. I stood there for a moment and thought of all the stories I'd told myself of this moment, in which I said the perfect thing, something that snapped like a flag in a clean wind. Instead, nothing, and it felt exactly right. At home, a new message from Molly waited like a coin left on a window sill. I don't deserve the kindness I'm asking for, but could we talk just once? I have something I need to say to you in person. June's voice in my head, what do you want? My own answer, closure that isn't punitive, information that doesn't reopen the wound. I said yes because sometimes the door in your chest needs to be opened in the daylight to prove it's no longer a trap. We met in a public garden where a girl in a blue dress took photos of other people's roses and made them look like they were in love. Molly sat on a bench and did not reach for me this time. She looked like herself and also like a photograph that had been left in the sun too long. I didn't come to beg, she said. I came to tell you the truth I couldn't admit even to myself, because the lie gave me a shape to stand in. She told me about the months before the first drink, the way our life had become list-shaped: groceries, bills, schedules, a competent orchestra with no solo. She told me how he arrived like a cough drop in a winter mouth, sugar disguised as medicine. She admitted to the thrill, the funhouse mirroring of herself she preferred for a while, the way she chased the adrenaline of being seen by someone who wanted a story, not a real person. And then it was a trap of my making, she said. He was never going to save me from the thing I refused to look at. And what was that? I asked. My own loneliness, she said. The part that doesn't go away just because someone else is in the room. We sat with that, a breeze moved the leaves around like coins. I'm leaving the city, she said then, not because I can outrun what I did. Because I want to be where I am nobody's mistake. You were not a mistake, I said, and surprised myself with the honesty of it. You made one, you made several, but you are not the sum. She cried again, but softer. Thank you, she said. For everything and for nothing. As she stood to go, she turned back. There's one more thing, she said. That first night, the text, I know you replied from my phone, I knew immediately. I panicked and then lied again, and the floor kept lowering. I know, I said, and I sent him one more. She blinked. What? The nasty one, I said, aware of how childish the word is and how exactly right it felt. When he texted to say I'd ruined his life, I told him I just turned on the light. Molly's mouth twitched, something like respect or relief that cruelty hadn't been my native language. That sounds like you, she said. After she left, I stayed on the bench until the light went honey and the roses became a rumor of themselves. On the way home, I bought fresh sheets because sleeping inside an old scent is a kind of self-harm we don't always name. I washed them, made the bed, and when I slid in later, the cotton felt like a new room I'd earned. To be continued in part 4. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday in a month that suddenly smelled like rain. Emily's kids were having a backyard birthday, cake, and a sprinkling of chaotic small humans, and would Nova like to come because they'd fallen in love with her photo. I hesitated at the idea of stepping into a house where the outline of him might still hang like a portrait, but sometimes the hardest rooms are the ones that prove a person's weight is their own. It was awkward for exactly 12 minutes. Then a child with frosting on his eyebrow announced solemnly, "Your dog is the best person here," and the spell shattered into laughter. Emily watched me with a gratitude that contained no debt. We moved like satellites, occasionally intercepting, planning around each other's gentle gravity. Later, as the sun did its soft, golden apology for having been so harsh all day, we talked near the fence line with paper plates balanced on our palms. He tried to call me last week, she said, the words light and heavy at once. I let it ring, and I thought this is what a boundary feels like. Like armor you can still move in, I said. She smiled. Exactly. That night after cake plates were stacked and the backyard returned to its neutral silence, she sent a text. I hope this doesn't complicate things. I like being your friend, but I also like you. No pressure, no expectation, just honesty. I stared at the phone. Nova sighed and shifted so her paw touched my ankle like a grounding wire. June's voice again, what do you want, not what are you afraid of, not what would be safest. I typed, I like you too, let's move slow and keep it honest. The first date we allowed the word date to describe was not cinematic. We ate ramen at a place where the air smelled like hard work and the broth tasted like patience. We talked about nothing critical because we could, because the urgency that had driven so many of our past choices had finally run itself to death. When we walked out, the night was clear and the city had turned its glitter on. She took my hand like a person who knows hands are not promises, they are present tense. The next morning, another text from a number I didn't recognize. We should talk, it's important. Odi? For a moment I didn't place it, the consonant standing there like a coat rack. Then it arranged itself, David, new number, new attempt. I didn't owe him a reply. But the part of me that believed in runoff, in closing valves and not leaving leaks in the system said, one last conversation, in a public place, with the rules plainly stated. We met at a bench outside the library noon, the sun punishing in a way that made shade feel like a moral victory. He sat down with the stiffness of someone bracing for impact. I lost my job, he said too loudly like he was introducing a character. I heard, I said. I'm not here to apologize again, he said. It doesn't mean anything to you and it doesn't change anything for me. That's true, I said. He rubbed his thumbs together like he was washing his hands without water. I'm here because I thought if I could look at the person I hurt by proxy, maybe I would understand the shape of what I did. I thought it was small, private. But it wasn't, it was a system failure. The phrase landed with a bleak, nerdy accuracy. I don't want your absolution, he said quickly, maybe seeing something on my face that he mistook for generosity. I don't deserve it. If there's anything to learn, I want to learn it before I rot. I surprised us both by nodding. Don't chase novelty when what you need is meaning, I said. Don't confuse being seen with being known. And if you open a door in your chest, make sure it leads somewhere with furniture. He laughed a tired, real sound and scrubbed at his face with his palm. Okay, he said, okay. We stood. A small wind moved the library's flag against the pole with a sound like a quiet bell. One more thing, I said, because it was truth and it wanted out. When you texted me that I destroyed your life, I sent you something mean, not cruel, but mean. And I don't regret it. I know, he said, I needed it. We shook hands like people who had finally stepped out of a burning building, and were grateful for the ordinary miracle of skin meeting skin without wanting to clench. That evening, Emily and I walked Nova in the long light. A kid on a skateboard tried and failed to ollie a curb and then tried again and landed it and whooped, and for a second his joy rang through me like a struck glass. This feels easy, she said. It does, I said. Let's be careful with it. We were careful and we laughed and we were quiet when quiet was better. When she kissed me on my porch, it didn't feel like a fireworks display. It felt like opening a window on a clean morning. Weeks later, a final letter arrived in a careful envelope, a no-contact order from Molly's attorney, not hostile protective. It contained a copy of the divorce filing, an outline of untangling, like instructions for disassembling a complicated piece of furniture. I signed where I was supposed to sign. I sent the papers back with a note that said, I hope you build a life that is honest and kind to you. On the day the divorce became a fact the state recognized, I stood on a hill in the park where the city's skyline arranges itself into a story it tells tourists. I thought of vows as bridges we build out to where we are, and how sometimes the land shifts under them. I thought of a kiss emoji and how something so small can be the thing that wakes you up. And I thought of the nasty reply I sent a man who had wanted me to bless his narrative of victimhood, and how in the end it wasn't the line that set me free. It was everything I chose after. To be continued in Part 5. Grief is circuitry. You learn where the shorts are and what trips the breaker and how to reset without burning the house down. I learned mine. The corner of 7th and Ellsworth, where we'd kissed one winter under a streetlight that made our breath look like an omen, avoid for a while, then go on purpose and feel it pass through. The restaurant with the wall of wine bottles and the corner table where a couple leaned their heads together in a way that used to make me ache. Bring friends, order the good steak, pay the bill with a small private ceremony. June told me it's not about closure, it's about integration. I wrote the word on an index card and tucked it into my wallet like something I could show a cop if I forgot who I was. Integration meant the story didn't end where the hurt began. It meant the nasty reply was not my defining credential nor my shame. It was a line in a larger paragraph. Emily came over on a Sunday to help me paint the small room off the kitchen that had been a junk room, and was now going to be a place for books and a chair, and the lamp that throws a circle of light like a modest moon. We taped the edges and moved deliberately around each other like people who had learned how to carry awkward objects down narrow stairs. She put on music that sounded like waking up in a city you love. We finished with blue under our fingernails and shoulders sore in a satisfying way. This feels like building a thing we can sit inside, she said. That's exactly what it is, I said. A few days later, a voicemail from a number I didn't know, Molly's counselor, with the kind of careful professionalism that means somebody is doing the work. She was in a program out of town, focusing on attachment, accountability, and sobriety, words that can be banners or weapons depending on who's holding them. The counselor said she wanted you to know not because she expects anything, but because part of this is telling the truth in all directions. I didn't call back. I thanked the empty room for the information. At work, a new project manager took David's old chair and turned it into a different job entirely. The team relaxed in a way you only notice after it happens. The office plants looked less like they were trying to leave. I volunteered to mentor a junior analyst who reminds me of myself 10 years ago, except he already seems to know where to put his anger. He brought me a coffee one morning and said, "It's weird, but things feel less performative." I told him the truth. That's because someone decided not to be the main character anymore. One evening, Emily and I went to a small theater where a woman in a red dress told stories so clean they made the room brighter. One of her lines lodged like a seed. Sometimes the apology you want is the life you actually live after. We walked home through a neighborhood where porches held entire families in the glow of an orange light, and I felt something settle in me, a quiet that wasn't absence. Of course, the past tried its tricks. There was a morning when a song on the radio played like muscle memory, and I had to pull the car over and breathe like I was learning. There was a night when I dreamed of Molly in a way that felt like betrayal until June asked, "Betrayal of whom?" And I couldn't answer because the dream was just a brain filing its papers. Integration, the index card in my wallet. And then came the message that was the last move on a chessboard that had finally emptied of pieces. From Molly, "I'm getting married, not soon, not to anyone you know. But I wanted you to hear it from me because the story you were in with me deserves an honest epilogue. I hope you're okay, I hope you're more than okay." I read it twice. The old engine didn't start, the house did not rearrange itself. I typed back, I wish you a life that is beautiful for the right reasons." I put the phone down and looked around at the room with the blue paint, at the small neat stack of books, at the lamp making its halo on the wall. I thought of the title my life would have had if it were a story someone else told. "Cheating wife sent me text meant for AP." My nasty reply shocked her. "It's not untrue as hooks go, it's just not the whole of it." The shock had been mine at first, the reply had been necessary like a tourniquet. But after that, there was the slow, quiet miracle of blood moving correctly again, to be concluded in part 6. On the anniversary of the 3:17 a.m., I woke before the alarm as if my body wanted to greet the day before the day greeted me. The world outside the bedroom window looked like a photograph of calm, the sky pale as a scar, the tree across the street lifting its fingers into a light breeze. I made coffee in the way rituals suggest, measured, grounded. Nova pressed her head against my thigh while I waited for the kettle to sing. There is a version of this ending that would have me deliver some triumphant last word, a zinger that lands in the mouth of the wound and cauterizes it. But endings aren't courtroom dramas, they are gardens that ask for tending until the quiet reveals itself as attention, not absence. I wrote letters I didn't send. One to Molly, in which I told her the ordinary things. The dog, the blue room, the ramen that tasted like patience. One to my younger self, the one who put his hand on a nightstand and turned a phone toward the light and felt his timeline split like a river around a rock. I told him, "You will not disappear. The part of you that believes in the good will not be laughed out of the room. The part of you that can be cruel will not win." Then, because rituals sometimes need witnesses, I asked Emily if she wanted to walk with me. We went to the river, to the bench where I had taught my anger how to sit. She took my hand the way you touch something you intend to keep. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked. "I think I want to talk about what came after," I said. "The building, the choice." We did. We talked about the ordinary holiness of mornings unafraid, of being a person who doesn't check another person's phone, because the door in the chest is now a room with a window and a chair, and a plant that is somehow still alive. We talked about the myth of closure and the funny, stubborn beauty of integration. In the afternoon, I visited June for what we both understood would be the last scheduled session. "What do you want now?" she asked, smiling like a person who already trusts the answer. "I want an honest life," I said. "Not a tidy one, not a dramatic one, honest." She nodded. "You've built one," she said. "It will need maintenance. But you know where the tools are." On my way home, a text arrived from an unknown number that turned out not to be unknown at all. "Thank you for not hating me with your whole life. That would have been easy for you. D." I typed back, "Take care of the part of you that needs meaning. If you don't, it will try to steal it." He sent a single period, which felt like the most honest thing he had ever said to me. At dusk, Emily and I sat on the porch. The street performed its small theater. A jogger counting silently to keep pace, a woman with a haircut that said "new job," a kid on a scooter trying to beat his own record. "Do you ever think about what you'd say to him now?" Emily asked, meaning the man with the fire emoji after his initial. I thought of all the things I'd wanted to say at different points on the curve. The sentences sharpened into weapons, the cold logic of HR policy, the clean verdict of my barstool sermon. "Yes," I said, "but I don't need to say them anymore." "What do you need?" she asked. I looked at her hand in mine, at the way the last light found the edges of her hair and drew them carefully. "To keep choosing," I said. Inside, the blue room waited like a new chapter. I turned on the lamp and sat in the chair and opened a book. And when Nova crawled into the space at my feet that she'd claimed as her own, I felt the gentle weight of a life that had survived itself and was now becoming itself on purpose. The nasty reply that shocked her and him and me, those words were a fuse and it burned out quickly. The light that remained wasn't an explosion, it was a room with a window. It was a morning with a kettle that sings. It was the decision to be kind without being stupid, to be strong without being cruel. It was a life that could hold sorrow and still set the table. When I turned off the light, the house held its breath and then exhaled with me as if it had been practicing. In the dark, I could see the shape of tomorrow very clearly. Not a surprise, not a script, but a place I could walk toward without bracing. And so I did. Surprise, not a script, but a place I could walk toward without bracing. And so I did.